Hello and welcome to the Dire Gentleman channel. My name is Gus Zagarella.
And my name is Henry Galley. We're a pair of writers who write for a living. So we have this show called Two Professional Writers where we talk about advice and stuff. It's been a while. Welcome back.
Yeah, and the reason why it's been a while is twofold. One, we kind of ran out of weird iconoclasts to go after in terms of their writing advice. And don't worry, we might get back to that. But number two, we've been working on some really sick shows.
Yeah, and we'd like to tell you about those before we get back in. The first is called the Kingmaker Histories, which friend of the show and frequent channel contributor Meg Chutin is showrunning, and that Gus and I have written episodes for and provided additional voices for.
If you're a fan of Walking the Earth fantasy stories, serialized, heavily world-building stuff with a hard magic system, like Full Metal Alchemist, Avatar The Last Airbender, that sort of stuff, but you want it for more of an adult audience, Kingmaker is the show for you. And it's right here on YouTube, and we'll be posting links that you can use to go watch most of the season that is out now.
It's about 3 gay criminals in a van trying to avoid an evil milfy flesh witch played by friend of the show Addison Peacock. If that doesn't get you intrigued, I don't know what will. Like Gus said, links everywhere. Footage of the animated trailer Meg made is probably on screen right now. You will not regret investing time in the Kingmaker Histories and telling your friends about it.
Apart from the Kingmaker Histories, we were inducted, it sounds so sinister, but it is kind of sinister. Yeah, well, I mean, it is bloody disgusting. The website has a new audio drama offshoot called Bloody FM, which has a number of new horror audio dramas, including one show called MAYFAIR Watcher Society, which has creatures designed by Trevor Henderson of Siren Head cartoon cat fame. The creatures featured in this are pre-existing Trevor monsters, some of which Henry and I, as well as Meg and Addison, have got to bring to life with our stories. I wrote one episode which features the Barnacle Bear, and it was a real blast to write, one of the most cerebral horror experiences that I've ever had a hand in writing, and the version of it that is out right now has great, terrifying horror audio design, and that's just scratching the surface. That's just one episode of this amazing show.
There is some genuinely pretty intense material here, so be sure to read the content warnings in the show notes. But if you've ever wanted to hear what the combination of the Dire Gentleman gang and Trevor fucking Henderson would be like, MAYFAIR Watcher Society is the way to go. Read the descriptions to find the ones that we've written, but listen to all of them, and I'm sure you'll have a fantastic time.
And with all that out of the way, it's time for us to read writing advice from all of you. You have sent it in from all over Twitter. I think this will be a really cool, constructive thing all around, and be a great tribute to this entire series up until now. Thank you, and let's begin. And hopefully, we will be good faith to all of you.
Hell yeah, no, I plan to be a real mean bastard, super harsh. The fans can take it.
I think we should just, mistreat and gaslight all of our fans right now. I think that should be the goal of this video.
Gaslight, gatekeep, Gus Boss.
Gus Boss, all right. I'm going to be reading these, and then Henry and I will discuss them together. So I'm going to start off with the first one.
Who is it from?
So the first one is from Green Machine.
Ah, Green Machine, classic. Love your comments.
So Green Machine had a number of writing tips that they posted to the thread. We're only going to go through a few of them just so that we have room for a bunch of different people, but I picked out what I thought were the most interesting ones.
Hell yeah.
Writing tip number 10. Understand what parts of your story need to be explained and what doesn't. To illustrate this, the Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka would not benefit from a deep explanation of how Gregor Samsa became a bug. In fact, the story is far more terrifying because of the lack of information. On the other hand, we have RWBY. The lack of information in relation to the world building makes the story far more confusing and not in a good way.
This might be the first time that Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis and Rooster Teeth's RWBY has come up in the same sentiment. I completely agree with Green Machine here. Yeah, I think it is just a matter of identifying what needs to be explained to enjoy your story. And there's no one-off formula I can give you for this. My advice for this would be beta readers. Don't explain anything about your thing to them. Just give it over to them and see what questions they ask. And then, after answering the questions, ask, hey, does anything feel over-explained or unnecessarily explained? because really the best way to know and avoid what we call the curse of knowledge is to get people who are completely ignorant to look at it.
I agree with that, and also to go in a little bit of a case study of a film that explains some things that are necessary and leave some things unexplained. In Pacific Rim, we know why the kaiju are here. They come from a vortex under the sea. We know why the Jaegers were made to combat the kaiju. We know why there's 2 pilots because of drift compatibility. And we know that drift compatibility entails this mind link. What we don't know is how human-shaped robots of this size work physically in the world. And if there was a detailed explanation of how they, broke those rules of engineering in order to create those, it would be a lot of time spent just basically hashing out something that there is no real way to do. You explain the important parts of the premise, but leave some of the stuff that just needs to be left to suspension of disbelief to suspension of disbelief.
Exactly. Like, you have to, as Gus's great Skinamarink video expressed, you have to kind of meet things on their own terms.
Exactly. And, a premise requires some explanation. To compare Pacific Rim, which has the 2-pilot system, which means something thematically and implies this very, tangible technology that connects 2 minds, and compare that to something like Growing Around, where the premise is very set, but, why it occurs and the actual ramifications are not explained by John Enter, and he believes he doesn't owe the audience an explanation on why the world is how it is. So we're not meant to understand any mechanic for this, not just a mechanic that the audience doesn't understand, but, we're kept in the dark about all of it by design.
God, we're bullies. What's the next tip?
One of the easiest ways to get better at writing quickly is to write flash fiction. Flash fiction is a short story that is at most 100 words. By limiting the amount of words you can use, you are forcing yourself to communicate the information to the audience in the most concise way as possible. The most famous example of flash fiction, For Sale, Baby Shoes Never Worn, communicates that whoever is selling these shoes probably had a child that was stillborn.
I mean, I completely agree, because as you and a lot of people on the channel knows, I got my first professional writing gigs and, cut my teeth writing lots and lots of short stories for things like the No Sleep podcast and the Hidden Frequencies. My time doing that, I feel, as Green Machine implied, really helped me develop my writing work ethic, which is just as important as your theoretical tool set and skills.
Yeah, and I think that there is something really to be said for writing shorter, less ambitious, self-contained things before you delve into any big project, or even between any of the big projects you do finish, because you should be finishing projects if you want to get good at this.
Yeah, there's an immense value in what you might call disposable writing, because it's great to care about your writing and its quality, but you need to kill the part of yourself that wants to be precious about it, because that will only hold it back from reaching its true potential. As we've discovered in some recent projects that are remaining classified until they're more developed, redrafting is amazing. And before you redraft, you need to learn to get over yourself.
And something we can talk about is that in MAYFAIR, a lot of the sort of creature features we've done using these Trevor Henderson monsters have been self-contained episodic stories. It's one of those things where, as much as you love the monster and as much as you love these characters, you need to, within the time limit of the episode, conclude their story in a way that gives the audience a full experience. And I think doing shorter formats, doing stories that end, facing the end of narratives will make you a better writer by and large, because you'll be seeing a holistic product through to the end, and you'll know what makes up something that's complete, rather than a theoretical, incomplete thing.
And you'll learn the value of moving on, which is really important as a creator.
All right, so Green Machine's next tip is: the easiest way to expand your horizons is to research what works, inspired the creators behind the media that inspired you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's great. I remember a fun story I have relating to this. So I'm a lifelong, Resident Evil fan. I fucking love that franchise. And when all the trailers and stuff for Resident Evil 7, which is the one prior to the latest one, which is the one that Meg is obsessed with, it was so exciting to me. Resident Evil 7, this new first-person take with a real emphasis on horror, that I looked up all of the different movies that they said inspired it, which were things like Night of the Living Dead, the movie Possession, David Cronenberg's film The Brood, and several more, and made a point of watching all of them. Yeah, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah, and watched all of them in the lead up to the game, and it made me all the more excited and made me appreciate the inspiration and the references. So yeah, I completely agree with this. I think it's not only a valuable exercise, it's also really fun. I think it's what Austin Kleon calls tracing back the creative lineage.
Yeah, I've been doing a little bit of that in film research for a project I've been working on, in that I've isolated a particular genre which has some classics in it, and I've found the movies that inspired those classics or were adjacent to the classics or ripped off those classics. And it's tracing the DNA of this that you end up being like, okay, well, where will mine fit in this complex web of people trying to get at this same idea from so many different angles?
Yeah, no, it's a great way to do it. All right, next tip.
So this is the final one from Green Machine, and appropriately enough, I think it caps off the sentiment of this little section we've had.
Hell yeah.
The best writing is made off the corpses of previous drafts and failed projects.
I completely agree. I love that that's kind of like, over the course of the Two Professional Writers series, that's the third metaphor we have for that. Because originally we had the bread. You know, how it's like the yeast left over.
Yeah.
And like the tomatoes used.
Oh,
in,
a chef's kitchen
fertilizer.
uses everything.
And then there was Chuck Wendig's take your children apart and use the parts to make new children.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Chuck Wendig, unlike us, can't stop abandoning his children.
By the way, the Chuck Wendig saga has a happy ending because we found actual Chuck Wendig good writing advice, and you can go listen to that. With only $1 a month, you get that and loads more content with 2 more hour-long podcasts discussing movies, TVs, or whatever the hell else every month. In my own humble onion, it's a bargain.
That's where the good nooch is, and we can swear in the first minute of those.
Exactly. All right. Fare thee well, Green Machine. Great work on those tips. What's next?
We salute you. So next up, we have Manga Writer, and this one is a little bit of a graphical thing, as in it is this. So it is organized into sections of the story, the setting, the cast, and the message.
If this works for you, for the stories you tell, awesome, whatever gets you to write. But in my opinion, making the focus this rigid, the idea that, for example, and not to dunk on Manga Writer, because I think we're here for this discussion, this idea that in every scenario the setting should have more attention than the cast, for example, is something that's just what a bizarre thing to arbitrarily choose.
Yeah, I think that my biggest personal issue, just kind of eyeballing this, the cast, the setting, and the message all being their own categories, and then the story being this large and substantial thing, implies that there is such an existence to the story that exists outside of character, setting, and message. I don't intuitively know what that section can contain other than plot twists and tropes.
That's the thing, because plot should come from character, and if your story is the same every time, regardless of the cast that's in it, you've probably written kind of a rigid story, because no one likes something where it just feels like characters have no meaningful choices and they're just pulled along by the whims of the plot. Yeah, I've got to say, I really, outside of if it personally, gets you writing, I don't find this one very helpful, and I personally wouldn't co-sign it. It's unnecessarily prescriptive.
Especially because how vague both the top and the bottom of the pyramid are. Cast and setting are really important, but story and message are so interchangeable in definition, when you really think about it, that, like, I don't know what it means to really have one on top and one on the bottom.
I could have somehow guessed that this was from someone called Manga Writer because they've used the manga font for the words.
You know, you're so right! Oh my god! That's a Denji speech bubble right there we're looking at.
Yeah, no, exactly. This is Denji explaining storytelling to a disinterested power.
Oh my god.
But yeah, thank you nonetheless for sending that in, Manga Writer.
And as we always know, we are of the utmost good faith if you agree with us, and we are of the utmost bad faith if you disagree with us.
You're goddamn right. All right, what's the next tip?
Next, we have Jason Boulard. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. There's a couple of tips from them, all in a row.
All right, let's hear them.
Write out character profiles first so that you have something to refer to when writing a story. It's a bit time-consuming, but I think it's important to know who the characters are at least at the start of the story. Be flexible with their change depending on how the story develops.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that can be a useful exercise. I rarely write actual character profiles, but I do take, like, fastidious notes on characters.
And I think one thing that, like, we do in our little, like, you know, peer group of writers is that, like, we discuss, like, with each other who the characters are, and we ask questions of each other. So, like, even if we don't write a physical character bio, we put it through the scrutiny of the team, and as a result, we have stronger characters before we go into, like, whatever part of the project we're working on.
Yeah, I agree. And also, a great little tool for characters that Addison gave us that came from her screenwriting tutor, because much like how Meg is a master's in animation, Addison is a master's in writing. I will ask Addison to write down that, like, list of questions to ask of your character, and we'll put a screen cap of it on the screen.
I saved that screen cap because I use it for some of my characters. Editing Gus already has it.
Well, excellent. We'll put that on screen for all of you to use. Don't say we never give you anything.
So Jason Boulard's second tip is, if you are stumped for originality, find a story, film, or whatever that had a concept you like but failed in its execution, and use that concept how you think it would work. A really good example of this is Lindsay Ellis's Numina series, inspired by her disappointment with the shortcomings of Michael Bay's Transformers film franchise, which she said had potential with its premise and characters.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm fully behind the, like, good artist borrow, great artist steal. For me, taking plot points or ideas or certain character archetypes, that's never a bad thing. For me, what's honestly much more egregious is trying to steal voice. That's something that I think is only excusable when you're starting out, because naturally you begin by imitation, but as time goes on, you develop your own voice. However, things like a certain plot point, a certain type of character or story, a certain, like, premise or setting, especially, as Jason said, if it's something that feels like it was kind of half-baked in its initial one, I think, yeah, that's something that you are almost obligated to steal and rework if you like it. Just make sure that you add enough interesting elements that it feels like there's added value.
You should only do this stuff, like Jason Boulard said, with something you legitimately like. If something just fails in its execution, but, like, you wouldn't have liked what it would have been if it, like, you know, lived up to its potential, then don't even bother with it.
You're just torturing yourself.
Like, if it's something that you're like, wow, this really could have been something, and I think the world is less good for not having something like the thing this could have been in it, then definitely go for it. That's what Meg and I sort of originally conceived RWBY Noir as, a sort of reimagining that takes this kind of idea of fairy tales and guns and, like, puts it in a new light and a new setting. We are, by the way, still working on RWBY Noir.
Animation takes time.
Animation takes time, but also when you create an entirely new original audio drama that then gets released, that kind of takes precedent.
And when Trevor Henderson calls, you don't say, no, Trevor, I'm working on a fan series.
Exactly. But it's so interesting too, because, like, the RWBY Noir script did inform a lot of, like, you know, writing chops that both Meg and I have developed from the project, and we have a bunch of it ready to go. We're just working on, like, putting it together and finding the time. So don't worry, you will see RWBY Noir here on this channel at some point. We can promise you that.
Thank you for your patience.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway, what's the next tip?
So, from Election Watchdog Patriot.
That's the best name.
Yes, so we say goodbye to Jason Boulard.
And say hello to Election Watchdog
Yes.
Patriot. Is that ironic, or is that, like...
We'll see. Writing tip submission. Don't feel the need to make your heroes OP or have them shoot through the ranks. A lot of authors are tempted to do this, but you should first ask themselves this: how does making the main character the best X there is benefit or push the story?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it's just good to be conscientious about every creative decision you make. Don't get me wrong. I think it can often be valuable to make your characters good at something, even if they're not the best. I think this concept of, like, OP, it's less about the power of the character and more about the challenges the narratives give them. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, my character's too strong, depower them. It can mean the challenges they're going up against are too weak. You need to increase those proportionally to still have that challenge. It really just depends on what story you're trying to tell.
Exactly. Or, like, the character has a skill set and is advancing in that skill set in a way that is mismatched to what the actual story is. Like, for example, a political intrigue protagonist doesn't also need to be, like, the greatest magician in the world, capable of leveling cities with, like, a single wave of their hand. I know that there's several anime that are like that, and it just kind of, well, why are we bothering?
You need to expose corruption that goes to the highest level of government, and you're an expert kickboxer.
Yeah, exactly. Or you're really good at laying bombs that can blow people up.
That can blow up a city to get a box from one NPC.
It's just one of those things where, like, it goes both ways, because, like, maybe you would want to see a story about, like, how many things can this person who's very focused on blowing things up blow up. It would be like if Chainsaw Man didn't involve him chainsawing things, You want the skill set to be part of the story.
Yeah, you definitely want the skill set to be part of the story, but ultimately, it's all just about making your characters sufficiently challenged.
Yes.
If you've created a story that your characters can breeze through, regardless of their skill level, it's probably not going to be very exciting, because the nature of interesting, like, dramaturgy is conflict. Tattoo it on your forehead.
We've also got some nuance in this equation, because Jason Boulard responded to this one.
Replied to Election Watchdog Patriot?
Yes. With similar sentiments to you, your character should be good at something, though. I think a counterexample is the book Iron Widow by Xian Jie Zhao, where the MC is overpowered but doesn't know it because the mecha she and her partner uses purposely stunts female pilots because of cultural reasons around gender.
Yeah, see, that's a good example of a character being very good at something, but you have adjusted the narrative accordingly so that they are still sufficiently challenged.
Yeah, and now they gotta shatter the glass ceiling. I like how our, like, case study examples so far have all been giant robot series.
Yeah, no, it's so funny. We'll make a rule: no more giant robots for the rest of the video.
But I love giant dancing robots that dance on people.
Was that a Chuck Wendig
Yeah, that was a reference to that.
God, all right.
So, we've got one from Rose Fox. I think a good technique to follow when writing is to take a look at the things that inspire you, be they other stories, visual art, real-life experiences, etc., and figure out why those things stick with you. Introspection is the key to writing a good story.
I completely agree, and it's why I love using Letterboxd. You can find us both on Letterboxd. I'm Henry Galley on there. What's your one, guys?
Mine is Floros is cool, because it's a reference to the...
How many O's?
The character I wrote. I don't know the number of O's off the top of my head, but more than 2.
You just have to go search my, like, friends list on there.
It'll be on screen.
But point is, I love having Letterboxd not only because I have OCD and I'm a compulsive list maker. Getting to see all the movies I've seen, you can even sort for the ones that you particularly enjoy. Getting to see them all in one place allows you to, like, think, okay, what are the commonalities here? Which, interestingly, is also something that the Duffer Brothers recommended in their masterclass course, which I watched recently. But we'd like to be.
Yeah, masterclass, please!
We're begging you, come on.
The other thing I like about Rose Fox's tip here is that visual art and real-life experiences, etc. is included. Because it's like, yeah, fiction based on other mediums and, like, your real-life experience, anything. Like, even, like, a food recipe could branch off into something that you could put into a story or something. Like, whatever.
And other people's real-life experience. Like the Kingmaker Histories, for example, Meg has done extensive research on like the Belle Epoque and World War One and Europe in the 1910s as a way of like adding a real historical texture in amongst the fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. So what it all comes down to is that, like, you know, you got to be as broad as possible with what you're pulling from, because stories can encompass a whole human experience. And I think Rose Fox says it very well in this tip.
Wholeheartedly agree. Good job, Rose. Next tip.
Coley, who wants you to watch Predator films, at Boyd Coley, says, even if you don't know where to go, write. You can edit and punch up a bad book, chapter, or paragraph, but you can't edit a blank page.
Agreed. No additional comment. It speaks for itself.
I think that is really, really good. Just get that material out there and you can make a new one.
You want to be a writer? Write. It's that simple.
Next up is World's Okayest Dungeon Master, hashtag BLM. Right on.
Have some more confidence in yourself, World's Okayest Dungeon Master. I'm sure you're great.
Writing in short bursts is a legitimate method, and you shouldn't necessarily feel bad for doing it.
Yep, whatever gets it written. As I've always said, the right way is the way that works.
Exactly. And I concur. All these ones that are like, do it, like find a way to write and don't be ashamed for like writing, great. This is one of them. Next up is the Trash Man.
He grows out in the ring and he starts eating garbage.
Yeah. Weird, but works for me. If I've gotten stuck in a scene, I try to flesh out the environment of the scene, maybe even draw a floor plan. Imagining characters interacting with their environment helps when I can't imagine them interacting with each other in a satisfying way.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I always think it shows a certain level of tactile consideration when characters like interact with their environment. It makes things feel less arbitrary. Like, I think this is something that, like, action movies, like the John Wick series, or, like, a lot of old, like, Jackie Chan action films do really well. How it's always bringing in, like, the geography of the environment or, like, objects laying around. For a hilarious example of this, there's a scene in John Wick 3 where he's fighting a bunch of goons in a weapon museum, and he uses, like, every knife and axe from the things on them.
And that's a good point, because it's especially important in visual mediums to have the environment be part of the action. Think about props, the location they're in, what the characters are doing there. Like, a lot of your scenes could boil down to the characters standing and talking to each other and being perfectly still. Maybe liven them up a little with something.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think that's a cool tip. If you think it would work for you, give it a try.
Exactly. Next up, we've got Saint Bob Joe, he, him, in parentheses, so we know the pronouns of this one.
So this is why it's great to put your pronouns in your name. It makes it easier. All right. Your Holiness, let's hear what Saint Bob Joe has to say.
Yes. Think about your favorite author, the person you want to emulate, the person who touched your life, the person who wants you to want to be better. That person's first draft sucked too. You're just like your favorite author. Don't be ashamed.
Hell yeah, completely
love
agree.
This one.
First drafts are meant to do two things: exist and suck. Then the second draft comes in for it to exist and suck less. And you can do as many drafts as you want to do until you're happy with it. And hey, here's the beautiful thing that Brian Koppelman taught us, that very few people will tell you. No one has to see it until you have a draft you're happy with.
Exactly. Then you can pull a little magic act and be like, oh yeah, my first try. Don't do that. That's lying. But
yeah, no, that's it's honestly not helping anyone to fuel this like really dumb pervasive myth that like things are often great the first time around, because rarely are they ever, even with complete masterpieces. Like, for example, when Harper Lee finished the first draft of To Kill a Mockingbird, she took it to her publisher, and the publisher was like, I'm going to be honest, this is a mess. It feels like the character is unlikable. It feels like this whole thing is just sort of a disconnected series of vignettes. You should focus on one family, give it more of a through line. She went back, redrafted, wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, a classic American novel. But here's the interesting twist in the tale of the story. In the last couple years of Harper Lee's life, when she was sadly like not in a great position and her kind of like greedy business people were taking advantage of her, they decided to publish that first draft as the book Go Set a Watchman, which was pretty much universally panned.
Yeah, so it really makes you think about, like, you know, the first draft of anything is not going to be the classic beloved work of literature or film that it could be.
Yeah, like, imagine if Harper Lee had either said, like, screw you, I'm going to take it to a publisher who will publish it as it is. Like, it would have come out, not been remembered in the slightest. Or, even worse, if she said, terrible draft, I should just give up. We never would have had, like, literally a seminal piece of fiction. It's the same with Jack Kerouac, On the Road. Like, that is something that he fastidiously edited and redrafted. Despite all of the, like, he wrote it in, like, a 3-week, like, drug frenzy. Like, no, Jack Kerouac had the public image of this kind of, like, free-spirited, like, super artiste, but he was a fastidious editor, and generally, you will find that to be true of almost all of the great authors. Like, go onto, like, Cracked or something like that, and, like, search for their, like, million articles of, like, super weird early versions of famous movies, and it will give you the greatest example of how so many absolute masterpieces from various mediums did not just spring forth from the head of Zeus, perfect and fully formed. That's just bullshit PR.
Exactly. So don't be that person. Be humble about the fact that you have refined your craft, that it takes you multiple tries, because everybody is like that. Show people your best work when it's done. And always strive to have your best work.
And be open to hear their criticisms and thoughts.
Because that's how you get even better work.
There's a really good quote from Neil Gaiman. He says, when people tell you they don't like something in your work, they're almost always right. And when they tell you why, they're almost always wrong. It's your job to be realistic about people's feelings on things, but then try to do your own exploration within the context of your artistic vision, why you think they may feel that way.
I think that's completely true.
All right, next tip.
So, another one about, getting advice from your peers. We have one from Pilar Medina. Have someone review what you wrote in any context, but make sure it's not just any random person giving a second opinion. Make sure it's someone you can and do respect. If it's someone who can steer you in the right direction for the task, another screenwriter, author, etc. In addition to what I said, I think it's good for writers to remind themselves that what they write might only be entertaining for them and them only. This is why it's good to have some guidance, especially when writing for entertainment. I learned from that experience.
I completely agree. As we've said many times before, almost nothing can survive in a vacuum. Surround yourself with other creators you like and respect. And if you're saying, I don't have any friends who, are really into this stuff, go to the r/writing subreddit. Go to, writing forums and spaces on various social media sites.
Find writing workshops in your area. There are, organization places, and nobody there is going to bullshit you because that's what they're there for.
And here's my tip as well, especially if you're going to go to, say, writing subreddits and stuff to workshop things. Be giving. If you want people to read and critique your work in a fair and thorough way, do the same for other people on there. Both because it will make people more inclined to give you the treatment you would like, and because, believe me, you will learn a lot about writing through critiquing and making edit suggestions for other people's work.
More importantly, as a human, you might make friends from the experience.
Yeah.
It'll just enrich your life in so many ways, to just build a community.
Abso-friggin-lutely.
Next we have the conscientious objector of literacy. I think it would be neat to put a lizard in the story, or maybe even someone who just likes lizards.
I agree. If you can't find a way to work it in organically, don't. But if you have the opportunity, why not?
I had to leave this one in because it's another one similar to, in our Tumblr thing, the, why not a psionic mind prison, where it's just sometimes just, a cool idea. If it's on your mind, just put it in.
And I'm not gonna lie, I think about that psionic mind prison maybe once a day.
Yeah, no, it was honestly a really fun and intuitive way to think about why not a psionic mind prison? Why not a lizard or a guy who likes lizards?
Hell yeah. All right, next tip.
Next up, we have Distant Egg Song. whose profile picture in this screen cap is a terrifying,
is Paul Blart.
Wide open-eyed cat.
It's so funny because Distant Egg Song I know is from one of those fucking Paul Blart poster memes.
Oh my god.
And it's always funny.
Yeah. It's funny here, too.
Yeah, let's see what the Distant Egg Song has to say.
Read everything you can out loud, especially dialogue. If something feels clunky when saying it, odds are it's not well written. Also, as an ADHD non-professional writer, another thing I've noticed, things that work to motivate one to write will not work indefinitely. Try to find multiple ways of building that habit and sticking to it, or you might wind up burning out faster than normal.
I agree. Definitely, to the second point first, do what works for you. And honestly, I used to be one of these, like, write every day zealots, and I do write most days in some form or another. But, don't burn yourself out. There's no prize for fucking killing yourself for this. It should be something you should be dedicated to, and it should be something that you enjoy. Don't destroy yourself. And to the other point, I wholeheartedly agree. You, me, Meg, Addison, and Charlie will often do table reads of our work, where we do, like, group edits, and we go through dialogue and hear how it all plays. So, yeah, read it yourself while you're, like, writing it, but afterwards, like, get a bunch of friends together, because even if they're not, like, writing friends, like, most people like to do a little bit of acting.
Yeah, no, it's really fun. I mean, for the first draft of my secret project that I've been working on, I not only read it with, with you guys, but I also read it with some of my local friends, and both experiences were really interesting and brought different, like, things out of the text.
I am so haunted by that one person who early on was just like, is it all going to be like this?
Well, that wasn't someone who was at the reading.
Thing.
That wasn't someone who was at the reading. Oh, man. Yeah, parts...
That's so
sometimes
funny.
The things I write traumatize people. Anyway.
Yeah, go listen to both the Kingmaker Histories, MAYFAIR Watch Society, and hey, if you've listened to some Lessons Borg, you probably know that's true.
Exactly. The one other thing I was going to say, for the people out there who, will insist yet again that they do not have friends, if you have any kind of access to a, like, text-to-speech sort of software, just throw your writing into that.
Yeah, it's not the gold standard, but it's better than nothing. And honestly, I actually find what text-to-speech is fucking fantastic and irreplaceable for is catching typos.
Yes!
Because these are the things that the human brain misses because they know what it's meant to say. Speech-to-text will just read exactly what is there, so it's really great at helping you spot, like, little mistakes.
As an ADHD professional writer, I typically leave words out on my first drafts that I don't mean to do, and catching that on the second time around is always good, because my brain has written the word, but my fingers didn't.
Yeah, and Meg's also got ADHD and would say the same.
Yeah.
Phil, you're here, ADHD writers.
Thank you, Distant Egg Song. Next up is Creeper. Commissions open.
Let's mine tonight. Get your creepers.
No! Fucking no!
We've been thinking a lot about creepers of Minecraft lately for reasons we're not legally allowed to say.
Oh, boy.
All right.
Did somebody order a creeper? Anyway. Creeper says, just because something is subversive doesn't mean it's automatically good. You should do both.
Yeah, but I'm not going to lie, though. Like, there is just something kind of funny to me about make sure it's good.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone sets out to make something bad other than maybe Quentin Dupieux.
The guy who directed Rubber.
And Deerskin. I think he's the only guy who sits down and thinks, I'm going to make something that's just completely shit.
I think that this, like, the heart's in the right place, but think about if it read, like, just because something is conventional doesn't mean it's automatically good. You should do both. Like, it's the same kind of blind spot.
Yeah, the advice ultimately just comes down to, like, make your stuff good. I think the thing is, it's not Creeper's fault. I think it's just because of, like, let's be real, all the Last Jedi shit. There's this constant discourse around the idea of, like, if a thing is subversive.
Rian Johnson Jedi mind trick everybody because he said the no-no words, and now we can't undo what it's done to online media discourse. It's fucking sad.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where, like, it generally is good to subvert some things, because if not, you're just telling a story everyone's heard before. So, don't be afraid of the word subversive just because, like, weird drunk Scottish dudes yell about it on YouTube.
Exactly. And I'd also say that, like, you know, a lot of things are a mix of conventional and subversive because you need to establish normalcy to break normalcy.
It's the whole, like, I always use the metaphor of a car. Like, there is a lot you can do with a car. You can give it racing stripes. You can change, like, the chassis. You can have, like, maybe it's a convertible. Maybe it has a fixed roof. Maybe it has no roof at all. Maybe it has four-wheel drive. But, like, ultimately, your car should always have four wheels and a steering wheel, or it's gonna, and an engine, or it's gonna fuck with functionality.
Yeah, make it good. Make it good is a good advice. Figure out what you want to subvert and realize why you're doing it. Always, that's true of everything.
Create consciously. Okay, what's next?
So next we have Mix HM Brian. This is admittedly not going to work for everyone, but I find it useful to list out the conflict and all possible obstacles I can think of before I write a short story. I probably won't use all the obstacles, but if I feel stuck looking back at what I listed, it will usually help.
Yeah, no, I think that's helpful. I think it is incredibly important to know what your source of conflict is, because as we said earlier in the video, conflict is the source of all drama. When I say drama, I don't exclusively mean if you're making dramatic work. Comedy needs conflict.
Yes.
Horror, action. If you're making a slice of life show, it still needs conflict. Because without conflict, there is no story.
Exactly. And the way I think about it, too, is that, like, depending on what your premise is, there are infinite ways it can go. You might as well, like, write out a few of those, like, possibilities to begin with. Like, if you're writing something like a road trip movie, for example, you want to think of, like, you know, maybe 10 or 12 destinations they could end up in, and you might not have time for them to go to all of these, but, you know, you can plug and play one of those and figure out how it fits into the overall story you're telling. It's just important that you thought of it in advance.
Back when we wrote Less is Morgue, we would sometimes, like, have whole guests planned for an episode that didn't actually end up in the script because we thought, oh, this situation and, like, Riley and Evelyn created enough conflict just automatically. You'll only know when you start writing it. There is a certain point where planning has to end and writing has to begin. What I personally love to do is plan a bit, start writing, continue to plan as I write, rewrite.
And you know what that also helps with is that, like, if you've got a previous draft and the redraft is a little bit different from the original, you can always just pick and choose what you were doing the first time around that you want to keep.
Absolutely. I think it is really valuable to, as you redraft, if you can, this is something that I don't always do, save the previous iterations. So if there's something that you're like, oh, looking back, this new draft could really benefit from this thing that is in the OG draft. Well, you've got it right there. You can go grab it.
Yep. Grab, you say? Sorry.
Fuck you.
We referenced the black phone a little bit too much in our inner circle.
You have no idea.
Oh, my God.
All right, next.
So, these are going to be the last two for this part of it, and then we'll come back for a second round of...
Hell yeah. Also, if you, watching this has inspired you, feel free to leave writing advice down in the comments, and we might use that in the next video too. We may praise or disagree with you, who knows, but you'll never know if you don't take the chance and write it down there in them comments.
But Henry, I was going to say that this was going to be the last interactivity with the audience. Why would we continue the conversation and both learn and gain from the experience?
That would be horrible. I will say, we will give, and this is like blatant corruption that I'm fully open about, but we will definitely give your comments of writing advice greater chance of being featured if we also see you interacting with the Kingmaker Histories and MAYFAIR Watch Society. Because you gotta have hustle in this game, baby.
Exactly. We're nothing if not nepotistic. We love it.
Yeah, we're nothing if not horrifically corrupt.
Professional writer corruption is running rampant around here. So, from Nora the Fan Dork, Green Heart, Blue Heart. Don't always live by my own tips, but never ever let filling out a world-building document keep you from writing chapter 1 or anything. If you change something about the world, the editing process exists for a reason and you can fix it later. Too often I see people get hung up on world building that they barely get anything done. And I think it's so important to remember that the story needs to exist in the world before you can really flesh it out. You make your core cast and core story and the world flows from them.
Yep, I completely agree. We actually have an expression for this. We call it soil map storytelling.
Yes.
When people get, like, so deep into the weeds about things that will in no way enrich their story as a method of procrastination.
That's drawn from, like, a legitimate thing, too, because, while Meg and I were doing our preliminary research for RWBY Noir, we ran into, something called RWBY Alt. All that we know about it was that the original creator's vision was kind of hijacked by a Discord server that went wildly off course and started just, like, creating all of this, like, intricate lore, including taking the world and mapping out the soil structures of every single bit of land.
Which is deranged, and also, might I add, is another one of the many reasons there will never ever be a, like, official Discord server for this channel or any of our projects, because, no offense, it'd be pretty fucking weird to talk to all you guys directly. This is the extent of the interaction we want here in videos and in the comments.
Exactly. Like we're, writing letters to each other back in the dysentery times.
Who do you think we are? Justin Moreland? All right, next one.
Oh, jeez, I don't know about that one. That was
Let's see if that makes it through the edit.
Woo! So, yeah, I think that's the...
Thank you, Nora.
Yeah, thank you, Nora the Fandork. Honestly, just world building is, it's something to think about the priorities of.
Yeah, take it in moderation.
Yeah.
As with all things.
I mean, the most important thing you can do is make sure that if you have a planet eater and a clan of wizards, you have to find a way for them to coexist in the same galaxy.
We need to go back and see. So, just for context, I know we reference this a lot. I'm not going to go into specifics, but just on one of Gus's old videos, there was just this deranged commenter who was just going apeshit, and then his friend jumped in and is like, this guy is the best writer. He spends weeks considering how, like, a planet eater and, like, a celestial protector could exist in the same universe. But as the guy went on, like, ranting, like, defending his friend, it ended up accidentally, like, roasting him, because he was like, yeah, honestly, this guy's one of the most amazing writers. His thoughts, this man's fucking brain, his biggest problem really is that he thinks so much, he never really writes it down. And I keep telling him he should, but he doesn't. And it's just like, wow, this guy burned this other guy, his friend, more than we ever could. And it's why we quote that constantly with reference to anything that feels like it's a person who puts way too much effort into thinking about shit but not writing.
That situation was devastating, man. I remember, like, saying to you after, it's like, if I knew that you didn't write things down, like, I would not say that even under duress and waterboarding. Like, that's because I'm a true friend. I don't think this guy knew what he was doing.
It was just such an amazing example of, like, it hurt itself and its confusion.
Yeah, oh my God.
So that's a bit of Dar Gentleman lore that you've earned from getting this far in.
I like this. I like getting back into, like, one of the flagship series of the channel. We're bringing a lot of those back these days, but, like, getting back into this one and just being able to say outrageous things that we know people will hear.
Yeah, no, it's hilarious. Welcome to the new golden era of Dar Gentleman, and I believe we have one final tip?
Yes. One final tip, which is by Will Carroll, open for commissions.
Alrighty.
When stuck on creating new characters, remember that nothing is truly original. Don't be afraid to take bits and pieces from pre-existing characters you like and remake them into your own thing.
Completely agree. I think we've kind of expanded on this with stuff earlier in the video, but I think it's great to have it on the record specifically about characters. And also, once again, look into real people, both from your life and from history. Never steal anything one-to-one, because that might just sort of weird people out a little bit, especially if it's like a friend of yours. But steal bits and pieces, because it will add unprecedented realness to your characters.
One thing that, like, I like to do sometimes when I'm, like, just thinking conceptually about characters, and granted, I don't use all these characters in, like, my written stuff. Sometimes this will just be how I generate NPCs for my tabletop games. I will, like, go to some, like, random character generator, like, that will just give you a bunch of characters from media, and then I'll be like, okay, this character is to the right of this character. What if I had this character's general sort of demographic and age and, like identity, but with this other character's personality. What would result from that? As a result, you get a wholly new character that is kind of not one and not the other.
And I love shit like that. It's awesome to be a remix artist. I fully recommend buying Austin Kleon's Steal Like an Artist, because I quote it a lot, and it's a really wonderful book to read if you're like worried your work isn't original enough. But yeah, this has honestly been fantastic. I'm really looking forward to part 2 and to getting more of these. And again, I reiterate, please leave comments with your writing advice down there. And if there's any that we find really compelling, we'll stick that in the next video because we haven't recorded it yet.
The next installment's going to be exciting. We'll go through the rest of the Twitter tips. We'll maybe add some of the tips below.
YouTube comment tips.
Honestly, given that, we've had such experience with, the Joss Whedons and Jordan Petersons of the world, we are overdue to have a cordial relationship with people that, care what we have to say and we care what they have to say.
I completely agree. I can't wait to see what you have to teach us, because we are all works in progress.
And we are so happy for the last year of content here on the Dire Gentleman channel, and we want to make this year, 2023, the best year that this channel has ever had. And one thing that we want to do in order to reflect that is to get to 100K subscribers.
And if you want to see this channel grow and make more videos, comment on stuff, tell your friends, subscribe, and most of all, please do hit that bell, because shit gets lost in the feed, especially the kind of weird shit we make, and having notifications turned on is the best way to make sure that you don't miss these videos.
Thank you so much for the support you've given, and we're just going to keep on rolling with this new content train. Thank you so much.
And we'll be seeing you
in the near future.